Who were the first civilizations to set foot on our planet? Our history is written by the notes of the winners, of their power and influence over the centuries. But in a certain period of time, people from primitive hunters turned into intelligent civilizations that created monuments, calendars, and ancient writings. All this has evolved to the present day, and we are the descendants of some relatively intelligent beings. But what if it's not that simple? What if the stories told by ancient civilizations, the tales of gods and angels, of giants and great disasters, were more literal than they first appeared? What if we received ancient knowledge beyond our human understanding? If we look at some of the details, an entirely alternate history of the human race suddenly surfaces, one that completely overturns conventional knowledge and the history we've been taught. This version has mostly been consciously censored, forgotten, or worse, ignored, until now. In the beginning of 1946, in the area currently known as the West Bank, a group of Bedouin teenagers tends their sheep and goats near the ancient settlement of Qumran. To pass the time, they toss around the stones they find strewn across the uneven desert terrain. When one of these stones is thrown into the dark side of a cave, the teenagers are shocked because they hear a loud shattering noise echoing inside. When they decide to follow their curiosity, although slightly scared, they discover a collection of large clay pots. While not realizing it at the time, these teenagers make a historical discovery of great importance. Inside the clay pots are hidden series of ancient scrolls. Subsequently, various archaeologists, historians, and treasure hunters found additional fragments of scrolls in 10 other caves in the area, bringing the total number of manuscripts found to almost 900. These manuscripts became known to the masses as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Strangely, among these manuscripts, there are large portions of a mysterious, non-canonical religious text long forgotten by human civilization, or so they thought. In our days, this text is known as the Book of Enoch. In its entirety, the Book of Enoch consists of 5 books: the Book of Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Book of Dream Visions, and the Epistles of Enoch, containing about 100 chapters altogether. These chapters tell the story of the 7th patriarch in the Book of Genesis, Enoch, the father of Methuselah and the grandfather of Noah, the same Noah we know from the Bible. However, this is not the biblical story of Noah's Ark. In fact, the Book of Enoch provides an entirely different perspective on events leading up to the Great Flood of Noah's time, as that is a completely different story. It tells of the Watchers, explained in biblical terms as fallen angels, sent to earth to watch over humans at some unspecified and ancient point in time. According to one of the earliest legends related to Enoch, he is the founder of the knowledge of astronomy and he's responsible for the compilation of the solar calendar. The Bene Elohim, or the sons of God or gods, number several hundreds. They are said to descend on earth at Mount Hermon. It was a sacred place for both the Canaanites and the Jews who invaded their lands. In later times, sanctuaries of the gods Baal, Zeus, Helios, Pan, and the goddess Astarte were built on its slopes. And the term watcher is used to describe one who watches, those who watch, those who are awake, or those who are not asleep. These names reflect the unique relationship between the watchers and the human race since ancient times. Over time, however, they abandoned their role as observers and began to have sexual contact with some of the humans, mostly women, and began to create what we know now as hybrids or crossbreds. The Book of Enoch tells of the Nephilim, the children born through this very crossbreeding between the Watchers and the humans. The Nephilim are described as giants and savages who threatened and plundered mankind, or, to put it in other words, supernatural man-eating giants. Angered by what the Watchers had done, those described in the book as mighty gods sent the Watchers to an underground prison deep within the bowels of earth. Enoch became the mediator between the gods and the imprisoned Watchers. This further provokes the wrath of Yahweh, and according to the Bible, the consequence of this mingling between the fallen and the mortals leads to the creation of half-angelic, half-human offspring. The book describes Enoch's journeys between heaven and earth in his role as mediator, how he flies with angels and sees the rivers and the mountains and the very ends of the earth from above. Despite Enoch's intervention, the gods decide that because of what the planet has become, it and all its inhabitants must be punished. Of course, the punishment is a great flood. This flood destroys the Nephilim and leaves the Watchers in their prison. Before that, however, Enoch has been taken to heaven in a chariot of fire. This is not the only place in the biblical canon in which the Nephilim appear. The Israelites visited a land inhabited by Nephilim, who were so large that they made the Israelites look like locusts. Of course, many things in the Bible were seen in modern times as allegorical, and this is more of a philosophical myth than a historical record. But there is archaeological evidence for one particular great flood in Earth's history, which is mentioned in countless religions and cultural traditions around the world. Did creatures like the Nephilim really exist? Many people say that it is just fiction and there is no evidence. But what if there is? In fact, there are numerous stories about giants in human history. The well-known traveler and explorer Marco Polo once wrote of a race of giants in Zanzibar who were so strong that they could carry as much as 4 ordinary men, while the people of modern Tangier, Morocco, once claimed that the founder of their city was a giant named Antaeus. According to an Irish myth, the so-called the Giant's Causeway on the northeast coast of Ireland, an astonishing 40,000 interlocking rock columns, was built by the Irish giant Finn McCool to cross the sea to Scotland and fight another giant. Apart from Norse legends, ancient Greek mythology is full of stories about giants. Perhaps if giants really existed, as records from countless cultures suggest, then the Book of Enoch begins to look less and less metaphorical and allegorical, less like a fantasy myth and more like a manuscript based on actual history. The idea of semi-divine heroes was born from ancient myths about alliances between gods and mortals. The poet and writer Pindar described the heroes of the past as a race between gods and men. Additional references allude to experiments that led to the creation of monsters by crossing animals of different and unrelated species. In modern theosophical occultism, there are legends of lost Atlantis, where it is claimed that its scientists bred half-human, half-animal hybrids as the slave race. Records of such events can be found in the mythologies of ancient peoples around the world, and especially among the Babylonians of Middle East. The story of Noah and the flood in the Old Testament is said to have originated in the Babylonian and Sumerian myths. It is known that around 10,000 BC, there appears to have been a catastrophic event that transformed early humanity. At the end of the last ice age, the first signs of agriculture appeared in the Middle East, with a shift from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to one of a settled agriculture. It is interesting to note that for centuries the Book of Enoch has been an important part of Christian and Jewish religious traditions. Many of these religious sects accepted the book as scripture. Furthermore, some even suggest that the Book of Enoch was the inspiration for the Book of Genesis, due to their many parallels and overlapping stories. Therefore, the question that arises is, what has happened? Why the Book of Enoch is not part of the Bible, and why does this question sound so unimportant nowadays? In attempt to answer this question, we will go back to the early centuries after the physical death of Christ. Far from the 39 canons of the Old Testament and the 27 New Testament books that we today know as the Bible. Originally, there were many Gospels and religious texts that made up the broad spectrum of the Christian tradition. As the Christians started spreading after the death of Jesus, the growing Christian church gradually began to choose which texts would be read and followed, which texts would be considered divinely inspired. The church needed unity, and to create it, the establishment of an official canon was required. In Dan Brown's book Da Vinci Code, this canonization is remembered as something rather nefarious that happened at the First Council of Nicaea in the 4th century. According to the book, it was there that Emperor Constantine and the others high-ranking church authorities, led by their own secrets and desires, shaped official Christian canon. Unfortunately, this is not historically accurate. The Council of Nicaea did not send the official Christian canon, but let's not blame Dan Brown. The famous philosopher Voltaire also made a similar claim in the 18th century. Although the story is not factually accurate, it is accurate in a sense. Why? The high-ranking members of the church are certainly there, choosing what is included in the official biblical canon. They argue among themselves, portray their opponents as heretics, and almost certainly seek to expand their own power. However, all this did not happen at one particular council, but rather it was a long process that continued between the 1st and the 4th century. When the process was completed and the Bible was officially compiled, the Book of Enoch was not included. But how could something as meaningful and powerful as the Book of Enoch have been left out? Didn't they know about it? In the search for answers, one can examine other Gospels that were also censored from the final version. For example, the Gospel of Peter, a fragment of which was found in Egypt in 1886, which tells the long-missing story of the reborn Jesus leaving his tomb, and includes 2 giant angels and a floating cross that says, "And they heard a voice from heaven saying, 'You have preached to those who sleep.' And an answer was heard from the cross, 'Yes.'" Or consider the Gospel of Mary, that notorious script in which Mary Magdalene is listed not only as one of Jesus' disciples, but as his beloved, perhaps even his wife. In this Gospel, Peter asks why he and the other disciples should listen to Mary, a woman to which Matthew replies, "If the Savior has made her worthy, who are you indeed to reject her? Certainly the Savior knows her well. That's why he loved her more than us." Although censored, even forgotten by many, the Book of Enoch never truly disappeared. There is something deeper behind it and its incredible stories, something that goes beyond the familiar and ordinary, regardless of whether it is a part of the Christian canon or not. The ancient Greeks believed that Enoch and the god of wisdom, Hermes, were the same person. But who was he? In Legends of the Jews of Antiquity, Enoch is king over men who reigned exactly 243 years. He was overflowing with wisdom, and the whole world consulted him. According to the ancient Egyptians, Enoch was the builder of the Great Pyramid, writes the geographer and historian Taghi ad-Din Ahmad in his work Hittat. He notes that Enoch was known among the peoples under 4 different names: Saurit, Hermes, Idris, and Enoch. For the Arabs, Idris means sage or forefather, and for Jewish as well as Christian theology, Enoch is the 7th of the 10 forefathers, one of the patriarchs. Before the flood, Enoch was the father of Methuselah, who nevertheless lived to the biblical age of 969. In the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, Enoch is mentioned with as many as 5 sentences. There we also read, "And Enoch walked after God, and disappeared because God took him." Just like that, he suddenly disappears. In Hebrew, the name Enoch means initiated, enlightened, knower, and this initiate does just that. He makes sure that his knowledge does not disappear without a trace. The examples could go on, and so it is fair to ask why Enoch, regardless of his name, continues to appear in the traditions of almost all ancient civilizations. The answer may be found much further back than the Greeks, the Egyptians, or even the Babylonians, perhaps even beyond the time of ancient Sumer. According to Sumerian texts, the earth was visited by a group of supernatural beings sometime in the distant past. These visitors are described in Sumerian tradition in a way that is eerily similar to the descriptions of the Watchers in the Book of Enoch. Instead of Watchers, however, the Sumerians called these beings Anunnaki, which literally means those who came from heavens. They were perceived as gods to the Sumerians, and according to modern thinkers such as Zecharia Sitchin and Erin von Däniken, they are an ancient race of extraterrestrial beings who came to Earth. Interestingly, the Sumerian texts tell stories of the Anunnaki who, like the Watchers, began to interbreed with human beings. In this process, a hybrid race with entirely new species, known as the Nephilim, was created. Like the gods of the Book of Enoch, the Anunnaki were angered by the state of the earth and caused a great flood. Same story, told in a slightly different way. As you well remember and know, it is not the form that matters, but the content. Perhaps maybe this is the only way we can read the true codes of our reality. Could it be that the Book of Enoch, as well as other related traditions, are simply retelling the older Sumerian story of the Anunnaki? Or simply over time, the same story has been wrapped and reshaped all the way to the present? Not only that the Book of Enoch is written in first person, but the author repeatedly asserts his authorship in the text, as if he feared that future interpreters would be so limited that they would not understand him. In the first month of the 365th year, on the first day of the first month, I, Enoch, was in my house alone, when 2 huge men appeared to me, the like of which I had never seen on earth. Let's consider the agrarian revolution that began around 10,000 BC, during which humans moved from a lifestyle of hunting and survival to farming and settlement. According to historical data, as early as 9500 BC at the lands where current Kurdistan is now, barley, wheat, rye, oats, peas, and lentils were grown, and goats and sheep were domesticated. Interestingly, the Kurdish people claim to be descendants of the children of the jinn, or the children of the spirits. Is this an ancient cultural reference to the interbreeding between the Anunnaki and human women? The ancient Near East is also known as the cradle of civilization, and the earliest city-states were found in the Mesopotamia region. The region's early indigenous inhabitants, the Sumerians and the Akkadians, developed the first written language, studied astronomy, and created libraries. The Babylonians and Assyrians followed them. In the mythologies, all of these races, there are stories of how the gods came down to earth and taught them their arts and knowledge. In another passage from the Book of Enoch, Enoch testifies to the mysteries of lightning and mysteries of thunder. Some suggest that this chapter is intended to illuminate the mysteries of energy and electricity. When we hear energy and electricity, we cannot help but mention Nikola Tesla, who, let's not forget, said the following: "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." It may sound ridiculous or hard to believe that such mind-blowing stories as those of the Watchers, the Anunnaki, and the Nephilim giants have been forgotten. The Sumerians ignored or even deleted deliberately from the pantheon of ancient civilizations. The Book of Enoch, along with the Gospel of Mary and Thomas, also censored from the biblical canon. However, given the way these stories fundamentally change our understanding of human history by presenting a new or well-forgotten old perspective on who we really are, their exclusion is perhaps no surprise at all, but these stories have not been completely erased. If we look at one of the most famous stories known to mankind, the one about Adam, Eve, and the Garden of Eden, if we read the text not literally nor philosophically, but as an allegory, metaphorically, God creates Adam to watch over the earth, just as the gods send the watchers to do so in the Book of Enoch. From Adam's rib, God created Eve. Adam and Eve reproduced, representing the crossbreeding between the watchers and human women. Adam and Eve were said to be able to eat anything they wanted in the Garden of Eden, except for the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Of course, they tried the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge, which symbolizes the watchers who bring advanced technology and knowledge to human beings who may not have been mentally developed enough to handle it on their own. When the two taste the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Heaven, they are said to become aware of each other. Their first realization is that their physical cloaks of flesh are bare. They rush to cover their genitals because they have realized the so-called serpent power or kundalini, which can be educated through intercourse and non-reproductive sexual acts. They tasted from the tree of life, which initiates the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth, and of the human souls incarnating into physical form. By reading the story of Adam and Eve in this way, it is easy to see the parallels between the story itself, the Book of Enoch, and other ancient writings. And maybe that was exactly the goal. Perhaps those who wrote the story of Adam and Eve were simply retelling the stories in the Book of Enoch in their own way, retelling the Sumerian story of the Anunnaki like so many other religions and cultures, inserting this important part of human history allegorically into their own religious canon, so that these ancient records may continue to exist through time, and though in a different form, be reminded of us, so that we may one day remember our own history, not by the human way, but by the cosmic human lifeline. What is human history? Is it what we know from officially approved history books, or is it something deeper, something more incredible, something forgotten? Maybe the answers have been in front of our eyes all this time. We bow before you and thank you for watching. Until we meet again.